They say if something looks too good to be true, it probably is. But when you're drowning, you don't check to see if the lifeboat has holes in it. You just climb aboard. My name is Elena, and 6 months ago, I thought I had won the lottery of life. I went from dodging debt collectors and working double shifts to wearing a 6-carat diamond ring and planning a wedding with the most charming, successful man in the city. Everyone told me I was living a fairy tale. My friends were jealous, my family was relieved, and my son finally had a father figure. But I didn't know that the diamond on my finger wasn't a promise. It was a leash. I was being groomed. Not to be a wife, but to be a scapegoat for a federal crime that would have put me behind bars for 20 years while my fiancé sipped martinis on a non-extradition island. This is the story of how a millionaire swept me off my feet, only to try and bury me, and how I burned his empire to the ground instead. It started on a Tuesday, the kind of Tuesday that makes you question every life choice you've ever made. I was 39 years old, a nurse at St. Jude's, and I had just finished a 12-hour shift that actually lasted 14. My feet were throbbing in my sneakers, the kind of deep bone ache that Tylenol doesn't touch, and I was staring at the check engine light on the dashboard of my 2012 Honda Civic. It had been on for a week. I had been ignoring it, praying that if I didn't acknowledge it, the car would miraculously heal itself because I didn't have the $500, or whatever exorbitant fee the mechanic would quote, to fix it. I was a single mom to a 10-year-old boy, Toby, and his father was a ghost who sent a check maybe twice a year if the wind blew in the right direction. My life was a spreadsheet of calculated risks. Pay the electric bill now and skip the car insurance, or pay the insurance and eat pasta for 2 weeks. That evening, the risk didn't pay off. My car sputtered and died right in the exit lane of the hospital parking garage, blocking a line of angry doctors and visitors behind me. I put my head on the steering wheel and just breathed, trying not to scream. The horn started honking behind me. It was humiliating. I stepped out into the rain, because of course it was raining, to pop the hood, staring at an engine I knew absolutely nothing about. That's when a sleek, charcoal gray sedan pulled up alongside me. The window rolled down, and I expected someone to yell at me to move my piece of junk. Instead, I saw him, Julian. He looked like he had just stepped out of a magazine spread for luxury watches. He was in his mid-40s, with salt and pepper hair and eyes that seemed to hold a permanent, amused sparkle. He didn't yell. He simply asked if I knew what the problem was. When I told him my car had decided to retire early, he didn't just call a tow truck, he got out. He was wearing a suit that probably cost more than my car, yet he didn't hesitate to lean under the hood. He got his hands dirty. That was the first thing that disarmed me. Rich guys usually threw money at problems. This guy threw himself at them. He managed to get the engine to turn over just enough to move it out of the way, and then he insisted on calling his personal mechanic service to tow it. I tried to refuse. I had my pride, battered as it was. I told him I couldn't afford his mechanic. He looked at me, really looked at me, not with pity, but with a strange kind of intensity. He told me not to worry about it, that he owned the garage the tow truck was coming from, so it was on the house. He offered me a ride home. Normally, I would never get into a car with a stranger, but I was soaked, exhausted, and late to pick up Toby from the after-school program. The ride was quiet, comfortable. The leather seats smelled like expensive cologne and new money. We talked, and he actually listened. He didn't interrupt when I vented about the hospital administration, or how hard it was to find good math tutors for Toby. By the time he dropped me off at my cramped apartment complex, I felt seen in a way I hadn't in years. He handed me his card, Julian Thorne, CEO of Thorne Capital, and told me to call him when my car was fixed. I thought that was the end of it. I thought I was just a charity case for a bored rich guy. 2 days later, the garage called. My car was fixed. New alternator, new battery, full tune-up. Bill, $0. When I went to pick it up, there was a note on the dashboard. Dinner? To celebrate the resurrection of the Honda. I stared at it, my heart doing a traitorous little flip. I was almost 40, cynical and tired. I wasn't the target demographic for billionaires. But I called him. Our first date wasn't at a Michelin star restaurant. He took me to a hole-in-the-wall Italian place because I mentioned I loved lasagna. He was charming, funny, and incredibly attentive. He asked about Toby constantly. He wanted to know about my life, my struggles, my dreams. For a woman who spent her days taking care of others while being invisible herself, Julian was like a drug. He made me feel important. He made me feel safe. He moved fast, but he was smart about it. He didn't overwhelm me with diamonds or cars in the first month. He knew that would scare me off. Instead, he fixed things. The leaky faucet in my apartment? He came over with a toolbox, not a handyman. Toby needed a new backpack for school? Julian showed up with a Marvel backpack, saying he saw it and thought of him. It was the little things that broke down my defenses. I introduced him to Toby about 3 weeks in. That was the biggest test. Toby was a shy kid, wary of men because his own father had been so volatile. I remember the moment clearly. Julian came over for dinner. Toby was sitting on the floor, struggling with a math worksheet. Julian didn't ignore him to talk to me. He sat down on the floor in his tailored slacks and spent an hour explaining fractions using pizza slices. By the time dessert came around, Toby was laughing. Watching them, I felt a lump in my throat. I had been doing it all alone for so long, carrying the weight of the world. Seeing someone else shoulder a bit of that weight, it was intoxicating. My best friend, Sarah, was the only one who didn't buy it. We were having coffee in the break room at the hospital about 2 months into the relationship. I was gushing about how Julian had surprised me with tickets to a show I'd been dying to see. Sarah frowned, stirring her coffee aggressively. She asked me what his angle was. She said men like Julian Thorne don't just date single moms from the suburbs unless they want something. I got defensive. I told her she was being cynical, that maybe he just liked me for me. She told me to be careful, that it was all moving too fast, too perfectly. I dismissed her concerns as jealousy. I wish I hadn't. I wish I had listened to that tiny voice in the back of my head that sounded just like her. But Julian had an answer for everything. When I asked him why he chose me, when he could have any supermodel in the city, he would look at me with those deep, sincere eyes and say that he was tired of the fake world he lived in. He said he wanted something real. He said I was the most real thing he'd ever found. By month 3, my financial situation was becoming a distant nightmare. Julian didn't just hand me cash, he advised me. He helped me refinance a loan I had been drowning in. He connected me with a scholarship program for Toby's school. It felt like a partnership, not charity. And then came the night that changed everything. My landlord decided to sell the building. He gave all the tenants 30 days to vacate. I was in a panic. The rental market was insane. I couldn't afford a deposit on a new place, let alone the moving costs. I was crying in my kitchen, looking at listings for studio apartments in bad neighborhoods, when Julian walked in. He didn't say a word. He just held me while I sobbed into his shirt. Then he pulled back and wiped my tears. He told me it was fate. He said he had been waiting for the right moment to ask, but the universe had forced his hand. He asked me and Toby to move in with him. I hesitated. Moving into his mansion in the hills felt like a massive step. It felt like giving up my independence. But then I looked at Toby's room, at the boxes I'd have to pack, at the sheer exhaustion in my own reflection. Julian promised me it wasn't about control. It was about building a family. He said he loved us. He said the house was too big for one man. So I agreed. The day we moved in, it felt like stepping into a movie. The house was a sprawling modern estate with glass walls overlooking the city lights. Toby had his own wing, practically, with a gaming room and a view that stretched to the ocean. I had a walk-in closet filled with clothes Julian had bought for me, just because. For the first few weeks, I walked around on eggshells, afraid to touch anything, afraid I'd wake up and be back in my roach-infested apartment. But Julian was the perfect host, the perfect partner. We had family dinners. We watched movies. He even helped Toby with his science fair project. However, once we were settled, the dynamic began to shift. It was subtle at first. Julian suggested that maybe I didn't need to work so many shifts at the hospital. He said he missed me, that Toby needed his mother around more. It made sense. I was tired. So, I cut back to part-time. Then he suggested I quit altogether. He said he wanted to travel with us, that he wanted me to focus on managing our life together. He framed it as a luxury he wanted to give me. You've worked hard your whole life, Lena, he said, stroking my hair. Let me take care of you now. It sounded so sweet. So I quit. I handed in my badge, and for the first time in 20 years, I was unemployed. I felt a strange mix of relief and anxiety. Without my job, I was entirely dependent on him. Whenever I brought this up, he would laugh and hand me a credit card, a black card with my name on it. What's mine is yours, he'd say. Then came the proposal. It was 6 months to the day since we met. He rented out the rooftop of the city's highest hotel. There was a string quartet, a path of rose petals, and a photographer hiding in the shadows. He got down on one knee, holding a ring that cost more than my entire lifetime earnings. He told me he couldn't imagine a day without me. He told me I was his anchor. When I said yes, people on the neighboring balconies cheered. It was perfect. It was the moment every girl dreams of. But looking back, I realized that was the moment the cage door slammed shut. The lock clicked, and I was too dazzled by the diamond to hear it. The changes became more pronounced after the engagement. Julian started to curate my life. He didn't like some of my friends from the hospital. He said they were negative influences, who were just jealous of my success. He slowly stopped inviting them to our gatherings. He encouraged me to change my style, buying me elegant, structured dresses that were beautiful but felt like costumes. And then the paperwork started. It began innocently enough. One evening, over a glass of vintage red wine, Julian brought out a stack of folders. He looked stressed, his brow furrowed in a way that made me want to comfort him. He told me that his business was under attack by competitors, that he needed to restructure some of his assets to protect our future. He said he wanted to open a charitable foundation, something that would give back to the community, something pure that his enemies couldn't touch. I want you to run it, Lena, he said, looking at me with those intense eyes. You have the biggest heart of anyone I know. You're a nurse. You care about people. I want you to be the director of the Thorne Family Foundation. I was flattered, but also overwhelmed. I told him I didn't know anything about running a foundation or business finance. He squeezed my hand across the table. You don't need to know the boring financial stuff, he assured me. I have a team of lawyers and accountants for that. I just need you to be the face. I need your integrity. I need someone I can trust completely. Can I trust you, Lena? That question, can I trust you, was his favorite weapon. It made any hesitation on my part feel like a betrayal. So, when he pushed a thick stack of documents toward me, I didn't read the fine print. I didn't understand the legal jargon about sole liability or asset allocation. I just saw where he had put the little sticky notes that said sign here. And I signed. I signed my name again and again, feeling proud that he trusted me with something so important. I was signing away my life, page by page, and I didn't even know it. A few weeks after I became the director, things got weird. I would go into the home office to ask Julian a question, and he would quickly minimize windows on his computer screen. He started taking phone calls on the terrace, speaking in hushed, angry tones. When I asked him what was wrong, he would flash that charming smile, but it didn't reach his eyes anymore. Just business stress, darling. Nothing for you to worry about. But I was worrying. I had a lot of free time now that I wasn't working, and I started noticing things. Letters from the IRS that arrived and then disappeared from the mail pile before I could look at them closely. Strange men in suits visiting the house at odd hours. Men who didn't look like bankers but like sharks. One afternoon, I was at a high-end boutique in the city, picking up a dress for a gala Julian was hosting. As I was waiting for the tailor, a woman approached me. She was older, sharp-looking, wearing a suit that had seen better days. She looked familiar, but I couldn't place her. She pretended to browse the scarves next to me, then leaned in close. You're the new fiancée, aren't you? Elena, she whispered, not looking at me. I was startled. Yes. Do I know you? She turned her head slightly, her eyes scanning the store as if she was afraid of being watched. I used to be you. Well, not the fiancé. The director. Before he dissolved the last shell company. My stomach dropped. What are you talking about? Check the incorporation dates, Elena, she hissed. And check the liability clauses. He doesn't marry them. He buries them. Before I could ask anything else, The sales assistant returned with my dress, and the woman slipped away, disappearing into the crowded street. I stood there, clutching the silk fabric, my heart hammering against my ribs. He doesn't marry them. He buries them. The words echoed in my head all the way home. When I got back to the mansion, the silence of the house felt heavy. Julian wasn't home. Toby was at a friend's house. For the first time, I didn't feel like the lady of the manor. I felt like an intruder. I went into Julian's study. I had never snooped before. I respected his privacy. But the woman's words had planted a seed of terror in me. I tried to open the drawer where he kept the foundation files, but it was locked. That was new. It was never locked before. I looked around the room, my panic rising. I remembered seeing him put a spare key in a hollowed-out book on the shelf. A cliché, I know, but Julian loved classic spy novels. I found the book, The Day of the Jackal. The key was there. My hands were shaking as I unlocked the drawer. Inside, there were the files I had signed, but there were others underneath them. Bank statements from offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. But they weren't in Julian's name. They were in mine. My name was on accounts moving millions of dollars. And then I found the emails. He had printed them out, careless, or maybe arrogant. They were correspondence with a lawyer I didn't know. Email from lawyer. The structure is ready. Once the SEC investigation hits, the director will take the fall. Since she has sole signature authority, you are insulated. We can initiate the bankruptcy and the transfer of personal assets to the trust on the 15th. Are you sure she won't flip? Reply from Julian. She has no idea. She thinks she's running a charity. She's a nurse, not a forensic accountant. She trusts me blindly. By the time the feds knock on the door, I'll be in the Maldives and she'll be answering questions she doesn't understand. It's handled. I fell back into the leather chair, the room spinning. I couldn't breathe. It wasn't just a breakup. It wasn't just a lie. It was a setup. He was using me to launder money. And he was setting me up to take the fall for massive fraud. The foundation was a black hole for illegal funds. And I was the only person legally responsible for it. He was going to send me to prison. Me, the mother of a 10-year-old boy. He was going to take away my freedom, my son, my life, just to save his own skin and keep his money. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run out of the house, grab Toby, and drive until the car broke down again. But I stopped myself. If I ran, he would find me. He had resources I couldn't even imagine. If I confronted him, he would destroy the evidence or expedite the plan. I looked at the date on the email. The transfer was scheduled for the 15th. That was 10 days away. The day after our engagement party. The party where he was going to show me off to all his investors, the very people he was stealing from. I sat there in the darkening room, the glow of the desk lamp illuminating the evidence of my own destruction. Fear is a funny thing. At first, it paralyzes you. But then if you survive the initial shock, it turns into something else. It turns into cold, hard rage. I thought about Toby. I thought about how Julian had manipulated my son, used his need for a father to trap me. That was the unforgivable sin. You can steal my money, you can break my heart, but you do not use my child as a pawn. I took photos of every document with my phone. I put everything back exactly as I found it. I locked the drawer and put the key back in the book. Then I went to the bathroom, washed my face, and put on fresh makeup. When I heard Julian's car pull into the driveway, I went downstairs to meet him. I poured him a drink. I kissed him on the cheek. I asked him how his day was. And for the first time in my life, I gave an Oscar-worthy performance. I smiled at the man who was planning to ruin me. And I decided that if anyone was going to burn, it wasn't going to be me. The next morning, I dropped Toby off at school and drove straight to the only person I knew who could help, even though I had pushed her away. Sarah. I showed up at her apartment door crying, holding the phone with the photos of the documents. She didn't say, "I told you so." She just pulled me inside and locked the door. Sarah's brother, Mike, was a forensic accountant, something I had forgotten in the whirlwind of my new life. We called him. He came over, looked at the photos, and his face went pale. "Elena, this is bad," Mike said, scrolling through the images. "This is a Ponzi scheme wrapped in a charity. He's funneled about $20 million through accounts with your name on them. If the feds come now, it looks like you're the mastermind and he's just the unaware donor. How do I stop it? I asked, my voice trembling. You can't just stop it, Mike said. If you go to the police now, it's your word against his, and his lawyers will crush you. You need leverage. You need to trap him. We spent the next week plotting. It was the most terrifying week of my life. I had to go home every night and sleep next to a monster. I had to listen to him talk about our bright future, while knowing he had a one-way ticket booked for himself. Mike found a loophole. Because Julian was so arrogant, he had made me the sole signatory on the offshore accounts to distance himself. That meant I had the power to move the money, not him. But I needed the physical security tokens, which were in a safe in his bedroom closet. I knew the combination because I had seen him open it once. It was his birthday. The plan was set for the night of the engagement party. It was a black tie event at the mansion. Hundreds of guests, champagne flowing, the perfect cover. Julian would be distracted. The night of the party arrived. I wore a red dress. Julian liked red. I felt like I was walking to the gallows. The house was filled with people, investors, socialites, even a few local politicians. Everyone congratulated me. You're so lucky, they said. He's such a catch. I smiled until my jaw ached. Around 9 p.m., Julian was in the center of the room, holding court. He was telling a story, laughing, the center of attention. I whispered to him that I needed to fix my makeup. He kissed my hand. Don't be long, darling. I want to make a toast soon. I walked calmly up the grand staircase. Once I was out of sight, I ran. I slipped into our bedroom and locked the door. I went to the safe. My hands were sweating so much I could barely turn the dial. Right to 10. Left to 24. Right to 75. Click. The door swung open. The security tokens, little digital devices that generated codes for the bank transfers, were there. I grabbed them. I pulled out the burner laptop Mike had given me. I logged into the offshore accounts using the credentials I had photographed earlier. My heart was pounding so loud I was sure the guests downstairs could hear it. I initiated a transfer. Not to Julian's escape account, but to an escrow account controlled by the FBI. Mike had made a deal. If I turned over the money and the evidence, I would get full immunity. But I had to do it before Julian triggered his own transfer. I typed in the numbers. The screen prompted for the token code. I pressed the button on the device. For -9-2-1-1-6. Enter. Processing. The screen said. Downstairs, the music stopped. I heard Julian's voice on the microphone. If I could have everyone's attention, please. I'd like to invite my beautiful fiancée, Elena, to join me. Processing. Come on. Come on. Transaction complete. I slumped against the wall, tears streaming down my face. The money was gone. His accounts were empty, and the FBI was 5 minutes away. I wiped my face, stood up, and walked out of the room. I descended the stairs like a queen. Julian looked up at me, smiling, raising his glass. He had no idea he was broke. He had no idea that the director he had created had just fired him. I walked up to him. He handed me the microphone. Say a few words, my love. I took the mic. I looked at the crowd. I looked at Julian. Julian loves to tell stories. I said, my voice steady, amplified through the silent room. He told me a story about love. He told me a story about a future. But the most interesting story is the one he told his lawyer about how he was going to frame me for embezzlement and leave the country tomorrow. The room went dead silent. Julian's smile faltered. Elena, you've had too much champagne, he said, reaching for the mic. I stepped back. I haven't had a drop, Julian. And neither have your offshore accounts. I just transferred the $20 million you stole from these investors to the federal authorities. Julian's face went from confusion to pure, unadulterated fury. He lunged at me. You stupid bee. But he never finished the sentence. The double doors of the mansion burst open. FBI. Nobody move. Agents and windbreakers swarmed the room. The guests screamed. Julian froze. He looked at me, and for the first time, the charm was gone. All that was left was fear. What did you do? He whispered. I fixed the engine, I said coldly. The aftermath was a media circus. Julian was arrested on the spot. The evidence I provided, the emails, the bank records, the recordings, nailed him to the wall. It turned out he had been running a Ponzi scheme for a decade. I wasn't his first victim, but I was the first one to fight back. Because I had cooperated, and because I had effectively recovered the stolen assets for the victims, I wasn't charged. The mansion was seized. The cars were sold. I moved back into a small apartment with Toby. I went back to nursing. I drive a used Toyota now, and I pay for my own repairs. Sometimes, I miss the feeling of financial security. I miss the ocean view. But then I look at Toby safe and happy, not visiting his mother in a federal prison. I look at my hands, rough from washing and sanitizing, but they are my hands. They aren't dirty. Julian is currently serving a 25-year sentence. He writes me letters sometimes. I never open them. I burn them. Just like I burned his perfect little world. They say love is blind. Maybe it is. But survival? Survival has 2020's vision. And if a millionaire ever offers to fix my car again, I'm calling a tow truck.